We're back for your ears only. I'm Melissa Exelberth.
I'm David Alpern with this quote from the news. "You can't believe the firepower, the kind of rounds coming out of that weapon." That was Carson City, Nevada resident Ralph Swagler's reaction to the assault-style rifle carried by Mexican-born Eduardo Cencion as he exited a local IHOP after killing at least 3 people and wounding 5. It was not immediately clear if he had been specifically targeting a group of National Guardsmen in the restaurant. Now this.
We are, as a Palestinian people, we need to be a member in United Nations, and this is our right to have independence and country and to stop the occupation.
The concern here is that you inflame the situation, you make it harder to get back to talks. It would be far better to get back to talks than to end up in a situation in New York that makes tensions in the region higher.
The bitter standoff between Israel and the Palestinians and the Washington-Jerusalem alliance were among factors fueling al-Qaeda's 9/11 attacks. 10 years on, the stalemate continues, but maybe taking a new twist this month. A Palestinian appeal for recognition by the United Nations. The campaign was explained by coordinator Abdullah Abu Rameh at a rally outside UN offices in Ramallah on the West Bank last week, and criticized by U.S. State Department spokeswoman Victoria Nuland, restating President Obama's pledge to veto it in the Security Council.
But after private talks with U.S. diplomats, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas said he would go ahead, despite the threatened veto, and seek at least General Assembly designation as a non-member state. And that was only one facet of change in the region last week. As Egypt, after Mubarak, became a less reliable neighbor for Israel, nearby Turkey promised to provide a Navy escort for Turkish ships carrying aid to the Palestinians' blockaded Gaza Strip. That would raise the stakes for Israeli intervention, such as killed 9 people last year, and for which Israel has refused to apologize, prompting Istanbul to downgrade diplomatic relations. Iran, meanwhile, moved closer to nuclear power with possible military implications, while President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad sniped at longtime ally Syria's repression of protest against President Bashar al-Assad. Quote, "A military solution is never the right solution," said Ahmadinejad, despite Iran's own bloody bludgeoning of dissent.
To talk about these and other aspects of a remade Middle East for your ears only, we're joined again by Dr. Jeffrey Laurenti, Senior Fellow in International Affairs at the Century Foundation, the New York-based policy research organization. Welcome back to our program.
Good to be back.
Let's begin with Israel and the Palestinians. Without a negotiated peace deal that once again seems quite distant, what would Security Council acceptance of a Palestinian state really mean, or observer state status granted by the veto-proof General Assembly?
Well, it would not mean the withdrawal of a single Israeli soldier from checkpoints across the West Bank the day after. It would not mean any additional power on the world stage for Palestinians to be able to force the Israelis out of the stranglehold they have over the West Bank and more tightly over Gaza. What it would mean is that Palestine would be officially recognized within, provisionally, the 1967 borders, a notion that Prime Minister Netanyahu and his right-wing coalition has disputed fairly vehemently, refused to accept as the basis for negotiations. And it would mean that increasingly there would be international pressure on the settlements that the Israelis have continued to insert into the Palestinian West Bank that will heighten this sense of isolation that Israel now feels. So it's not an immediate result, but it's a longer-term pressure. Indeed, it would, in effect, open for the Palestinians the way to membership in all other UN agencies except the New York body, the General Assembly, including, and this is what has the Israelis most terrified, their accession to the International Criminal Court, which would subject any number of potential Israeli military actions on Palestinian territory to long wrangling and international judicial investigation.
You've written that this summer's U.S. debt ceiling settlement could be a model for Security Council action that would avoid both a veto and a General Assembly action. Explain that.
Well, the thought that we had advanced a few weeks ago was that since this remains a very difficult political problem between the United States and Israel, that one could postpone that reckoning a couple years by Security Council adoption of a resolution that would set out very specific benchmarks that have been many times reiterated by the so-called negotiating quartet of the U.S., European Union, Russia, and the United Nations, and that at times the one side or the other have seemed to agree to. And if the Palestinians will have fulfilled all the items on that checklist, within 2 years, their entry into the United Nations would be guaranteed without a second Security Council vote. That is, upon certification, perhaps by the Secretary General, that the Palestinians have fulfilled all of their requirements under this resolution, they are in. What that would do is push this or kick this can down the road to beyond the American presidential election next year, and perhaps more importantly, the Israeli Knesset elections of 2013, which could result in an Israeli majority that is more favorable to signing the peace deal that virtually everybody in the Middle East knows the terms of.
And failing that dynamic, what would a U.S. veto in the Security Council cost Washington in the region, where popular sentiment is less disposed to Israel than were some of the deposed rulers there?
Well, I'm not sure that those deposed rulers, and we're thinking only of 3 right now who actually have been deposed, Mubarak, Ben Ali in Tunisia, who was not really a factor in this, and now Gaddafi. I don't think that they were fundamentally that apart from where their populations would have been in terms of policy or where their successor governments will be. But they were realist, and the Israelis felt, at least with Mubarak, a certain comfort level. I guess we'll get to that in a spell. What's the impact for the U.S. of vetoing the application? I don't think anybody is surprised. I think that the region, the Arabs in the region, have long since concluded that the United States is entirely aligned with Israel. They'd gotten their hopes up that Obama, they thought, seemed to recognize that you needed to end this, but Obama didn't have the political strength to be able to coerce this Israeli government. So it's just another mark of why the United States, in their view, is not a reliable and trusted partner for peace, but rather just an agent of Israeli interests.
Jeffrey Laurenti is Senior Fellow in International Affairs at the Century Foundation, the New York-based policy research organization.
Next, the even longer war against drugs for your ears only.